I will be buying a broadcast module. Hi everybody. I'm going to talk about remote ID and why I'm going to buy a remote ID module. So, to be plainly obvious, I have a Part 107. For me to be compliant, I will need to get a remote ID module, and I'm probably going to end up putting it on my GEP-RC Mark V. I mean, I have multiple drones. I have some small ones, but this is the thing I don't understand. According to the new rules, if I want to use my Nano Micro 1S, this thing weighs 2 ounces with a camera for commercial purpose. This will require a remote ID module. And I am very curious to see how the FAA is going to explain to me where I'm going to put one of these somewhere on this micro drone. Nano drone. I mean, this thing weighs about 2 ounces with a battery on it. So for a 5-inch, yeah, I could see some space, and I'm going to make it compliant. But like with most things that Americans do, I'm going to do the bare minimum to be compliant. I'm going to set it up on my drones that I'm going to use for my commercial purpose, because that's the whole point. I got my Part 107 is to start a drone business, and this has already got remote ID. I don't need to do anything else to this. Most pilots that are going to be flying are going to be using stuff that already has remote ID. And let's go over the numbers. So, as of January 2023, there were 855,860 registered drones in the United States. Of those drones, 63% are for recreational use. 37%, 316,075 drones, were for commercial purposes. These commercial purposes, taking photos, counts. But the problem is, DJI has sold millions of drones, camera drones, that have remote ID on them, but are sub 250. These are still going to show up in the system. So you're going to have millions of pilots flying their drones, taking pictures, and they're going to be reported on the system, and they're going to pop up, and they're going to have to answer for why they're flying a drone without a license. And they're going to have to weigh it and prove it, and I don't know how the FAA is going to do that. Right now, the FAA receives 100 calls a month about drone flying. So this is supposedly about safety. So I want to talk about safety for a second. So we drone pilots, we do have injuries. We're not surprised. We got blades, you know, they do fly, they do hit things. Between 2015 and 2022, there were 4,250 drone injuries. That's not a lot, guys. Not a lot at all. Of those injuries, 56% of them were to the fingers. Of these injuries, 72% are lacerations. So apparently the FAA is very concerned about us cutting our fingers in our faces, because they are putting remote ID on this craft. It is a craft, according to the FAA, is more dangerous than this ultralight. This ultralight plane does not require a license, does not require to be registered, does not require ABS anti-detection, does not require to be broadcasting any information at all. They only ask that they carry a radio so they can keep contact with the ground. There's over 20,000 ultralight pilots out there in the United States, and this is a growing flight industry. No license, no craft registration. They have 60 deaths a year from ultralight crashes and incidents. 0 deaths per year. So let's go into the unregulated register space and other unregulated things. Paragliders. These paragliders do not require a license, do not require anything. They have 2 deaths per year. That works out to be 1 in 750 paragliders. Not a lot, but still, 2 deaths a year. 0. We're gonna keep going. Hang gliders, no license, no registration to the craft. 3.5 deaths per year. Now that's not a lot, but once again, these are hundreds of pounds carrying people, and they're killing people every year. 0 deaths, nobody's riding. The numbers work out on this one for 1 in every 100 hang gliders are gonna have a death. Paragliders, these have motors. These carry gasoline. On average, they have 1 death per year. There's no license required for this. There's no registration required for this. The FAA is telling us that these are more dangerous than these in the same airspace. How is the FAA gonna suggest that this is for safety? We get to the final thing that I found and did my numbers on. So, hot air balloons. A license is required to operate a hot air balloon. The craft does have to register and pass safety inspections. Because of this, worldwide between 2008 and 2022, only 30 deaths in hot air balloons were reported. A highly regulated craft that carries people safely because of registration and of oversight. 0 deaths. Mostly cutting fingers, a few abrasions. We're not talking life-altering deaths and injuries. 8% of Americans right now in the United States own drones. How many calls are going to come in from people that are just flying their drones for fun? So, but let's go back to drones. These drones that they're talking about, Google, Amazon, Walmart, are going to be autonomous. Zipline right now runs autonomous, but as what affects this is going to affect those drones too. And this is not the problem. They're not going to be running into these drones. This flies 10 to 20 feet off the ground. It can go higher, it can go lower, but this thing weighs 2 ounces. I don't think it's going to knock a delivery drone out of the sky. But you know what will? Power lines. Anti-detection on these autonomous drones, we're not sure. They don't exist yet, but we're already being regulated. But the thing that's going to knock these drones out of the sky the most aren't going to be paragliders, hot air balloonists, drones, recreational. This Flurkin would be a sub 250, but as soon as I put an action camera on it, it goes over 250. Once again, it will require remote ID, no craft. It's foam. It weighs barely over 250 grams. This, according to the FAA, is more dangerous than this hundreds of pounds of man-made steel MacGyvered together with duct tape that carries people. So we live in a mad world, people. But once again, I will buy my module. I will set it up. I will hook it up. But for the most part, I'm probably not going to use it because most of my drone business is going to be working off of these drones that already have it in it. So most of the commercial drivers that are going to be pilots for the drones that we're talking about, it's going to be harder finding us doing these things legally with remote ID than it is going to be find people breaking the law, because there's only so many of us who have actually registered with remote ID. So the problem is going to be the FAA. And I want to give you guys just a little thing. So let's talk about the drone tags. This is a drone tag. It's from Vertigo Drones. It goes for $199, but what I'm hearing that they're telling law enforcement for is looking for these LEDs on this module. They want to see that these LEDs are lit up in whatever remote ID module you're using to prove that it's broadcasting. Now what I'm going to tell you guys is go to over Alien Drones. It's 107rid.com. Alien Drones has what we're going to call an anti-Karen update that broadcasts to the FAA frequency, but not to the drone app's frequency. So you can fly your drone with remote ID broadcast module working perfectly and functioning and being compliant without it showing up on a Karen ID. So I'm going to suggest that you look into this. They have the module itself, they have the module with the GPS and the antenna, and they have just the module so you can plug it into your drone however you see fit. But for me, we're talking the bare minimum. I am going to do the absolute bare minimum that's required for me from the FAA to be compliant. And that's all they're asking us to do. I know it seems like surrender. I know it seems like I'm betraying the FPV community, but guess what? As a pilot 107, I have to comply. And everybody else is going to have to comply, because you're going to start receiving letters in the mail from the FAA because they have that your registered drone does not have a ID tag, remote ID tag, and now you got to explain the things you're posting on YouTube and social media. Are they compliant? And if the answer is no, then you're going to get another letter. So I am going to be compliant. The unit I'm planning on using is called a DB121. It's got no case. It comes with the GPS unit and an antenna. You power it to the drone. So I'm going to make a little plug it into the drone, make it light up. The GPS locks suck on these things. The apps for the Karens really aren't that great. They suck too. But once again, I am required to put a remote ID module on this sub 250 drone, because if I want to put the GoPro on here and use it as commercial, I have to comply. So send me the hateful emails, send me the angry comments. I'm gonna get them. I know it's gonna happen, but we are already uncompliant. Every time we turn on this VTX to connect to our goggles, we are not FCC compliant if you don't have a ham radio. And I'm willing to bet most of the 107 pilots out there don't have a ham radio, because why? The FCC is not checking. They're not enforcing. FAA is going to do roughly the same thing, but it's going to be by mail and by letter. But if you get stopped, I am not a lawyer. I am not going to pretend to be one. You have to comply with the cops if they ask you questions about your drone. Of course, if it's powered by the drone, it's not going to light up until the drone's plugged in. Pack up your stuff and leave. But if you're compliant, you can show them you're compliant, and they will leave you alone. So I am going to have to save up money. I did start my own drone business earlier this year, so for me to be compliant with the FAA, I am going to buy a broadcast module. And I'm going to hate it. But once I get one and I register it to one of my drones, I have 2 drones that have RID, I'm compliant. And that's what I'm going to do. So I have lots of other drones, foamies, 5 inches. They're registered, but I'll fly them when I want to fly them. But I don't know if there's going to be a module of that or not. And I don't see a whole lot of cops in my area looking for drone offenders. And so rip and dip if you want, guys, but the FAA is going to be sending out letters, and I know it's going to be soon. AMA, you guys have no FRIAs. You all need to be compliant. You all need to get modules for all your foamies, all of them. AMA is not going to let you go to any field or any event, any racing event. I'm willing to bet Flight Test and Flight Fest next year, if it's not a FRIA, they're going to ask for remote ID modules to fly on the property. So get used to it. And racing drones, you show up to an event, you've got to be RID compliant. They're going to start turning people away. So RID's here. It's coming. You're going to have to get a module. But as the Americans do, the absolute least we possibly can. I'm going to send this video to my congressman because I want to answer of why this 2-ounce drone is more dangerous in the air at 10 to 20 feet than this hundreds of pound ultralight, not considered a craft, because if it was considered a craft, it would have to be registered. So please, if the FAA can answer my question of why this 2-ounce drone is more dangerous than this hundreds of pounds aircraft with no anti-detection, no remote ID, no broadcast, only a radio if they feel like it. So I'm not calling out you guys in the ultralight community in the Paramount, but you have no regulations, no licensing. I have a Part 107. Wasn't hard to get, but I still got it. You guys don't even have to do that. So those are my thoughts. They're not popular, but I had to make this video. So I will be buying a broadcast module. All right, you guys